Okay, welcome back to the last video of this week, in which we're going to have a brief introduction into stress, in particular stressed syllables. Words in English often have a stressed syllable and one or more unstressed syllables, but how do we know which syllables get stressed? Do we just have to remember them for each and every word, or are there patterns among the syllables to determine the placement of stress? Now, stress can be described in terms of the phonetics of stress, how we pronounce stress on stressed syllables. We can also look at the patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables in words. So first, in terms of phonetics, the stress patterns of English in terms of phonetics, stress refers to how we pronounce words with extra energy, extra sound energy. Syllables that are... In terms of phonetics, the difference between stressed syllables and unstressed syllables is in how much sound energy is produced. First of all, syllables in words are not all pronounced equally. Some of them are stressed, and some of them are unstressed. The phonetic properties of stress are higher pitch, right? So the voice is higher than on unstressed syllables. The duration will have longer stressed syllables than unstressed syllables. And the loudness. There's greater intensity of sound when we pronounce stressed syllables in comparison to unstressed syllables. And finally, vowel reduction is a consequence of stress, which is to say we reduce the pronunciation of vowels when they appear in unstressed syllables. Well, what does it mean to reduce the pronunciation of a vowel? Well, it means that we reduce the tongue movements involved. So high vowels become less high. In fact, they become mid. Low vowels become less low. They become mid. Front vowels become less front. They become central. Back vowels become less back. They also become central. Basically, there's a reduction of the vowel to schwa, the reduced vowel, which is why I think I mentioned earlier it's the most frequently produced vowel in spoken English because of the effects of stress. But that's the phonetics of stress. We really want to look at the phonology of stress, the patterns that we see. So let's look at a number of examples. English has a number of two-syllable words that have their own stress patterns. So nouns, for example, tend to have initial stress, which is to say the first syllable in a two-syllable word tends to be the stressed syllable. Words like ticket, ticket, cavern, cavern, focus, party, attic. Whereas verbs often have final stress, at least two-syllable verbs. Words like agree, delay, invite, attract, consist, involve. And hopefully you can hear that my voice pitch rises from the first syllable to the second syllable among the verbs, but falls from the first syllable to the second syllable for the nouns. Ticket, agree. That's a property of stress, but it's only a tendency. Right? It's not the case that all English nouns have initial stress, not even all two-syllable words. We have a lot of two-syllable borrowed words from other languages that keep their final stress. Words like ballet and fondue from French still have final stress, at least in American English. There are some varieties of British English that pronounce ballet as ballet with initial stress because it's been fully absorbed into the set of nouns in English, at least in British English. And verbs, we also have verbs that are pronounced with initial stress if they're verbs based on nouns. So accent is a noun. I speak with an accent. Or accent can be a verb, right? To accent the color in the room or something. I'm not sure. Impact. Impact can be a noun. Is a verb, but based on a noun. Promise. Right? To give someone a promise is to promise them. They're pronounced with the same stress pattern. And there are also words that can be nouns or verbs, and often they have different stress patterns depending on whether they're used as a noun or used as a verb. Right? And in the case of the noun use, they get pronounced with initial stress. Right? Insult, research, conduct, combat, record. But when the same words are used as verbs, they get final stress. And sometimes that causes a slight difference in the vowel pronunciation because of the effects of vowel reduction on the unstressed syllable. Right? A different syllable is now the unstressed syllable. So rather than insult, the verb is insult. The noun, insult. The verb, insult. Verbs are research, conduct, combat, record. Or if we want to compare the pairs, right, noun-verb pairs, insult, insult, research, research, conduct, conduct, combat, combat, record, record. So we have these kinds of pairs as well. Now, let's look at multisyllabic words. Right? Multi meaning many, well, in this case, 3 or more, words with many syllables. Now, we'll start with the 3-syllable words like cinema, romantic, exercise. Right? 3 different patterns. Right? Cinema has stress on the first syllable only. Cinema. The second and third syllables both have vowel reduction because they're unstressed syllables. N-ma. Cinema. Cinema. Right? In romantic, the second syllable is stressed. Romantic. Romantic. And in the third example, in exercise, both the first and the third syllables are stressed, and only the middle syllable is unstressed. So it's the middle syllable that has vowel reduction, and you get exercise, exercise. And notice there are actually 2 degrees of stress. Ek and size are both stressed, but ek has higher pitch. We call that primary stress. Size does not have vowel reduction. It has some degree of stress. We call that secondary stress. It doesn't get the same rise in pitch that X gets. Exercise. So 3-syllable words have at least 3 different stress patterns. Cinema, romantic, exercise. Or let's look at 4-syllable words. Words like simplicity, ceremony, institution. Again, these are 3 different patterns. Each of them has 2 stressed syllables, but it's a different syllable in each one of them. Right? In simplicity, it's the first and third syllables that have stress. The first syllable has secondary stress, the kind of weaker stress. The third syllable, lis, has primary stress, simplicity. Oops, hang on a second. Simplicity. No, I'm counting wrong. There are 4 syllables. Secondary stress is on the first syllable. Primary stress is on the second syllable, not the third, the second syllable. Simplicity. Simplicity. Right? But the pitch is pronounced on the second syllable. It's ceremony and institution that are both pronounced on the first and third syllables. The difference between them is which syllable gets primary stress and which syllable gets secondary stress. So ceremony is stressed on the first and third syllables, ceremony, with primary stress on the first syllable, ceremony. ceremony. In institution, stress is still on the first and third syllables, but this time primary stress is the third syllable and secondary stress is on the first syllable. Institution, institution. So again, we have these different patterns. Let's quickly look at 5-syllable words. Words like university, individual, elementary. In these cases, again, there are 2 stressed syllables in each one of them, and the underlined syllables are the primary stress, and they're marked with an accent that goes this way, and the secondary stress is marked with an accent that goes the other way. So U in the university has secondary stress. In individual, elementary. Okay? So the stress patterns of words vary depending on certain properties of the syllables, and that's what we want to look at. Okay? The property that we're going to look at is known as syllable weight. So whether the syllable is heavy or light. And we determine a syllable's weight based on the number of segments in the rhyme of the syllable. So a light syllable is one that has only one segment in the rhyme. So in cinema, all of them are light syllables. Cinema. Citizen. Deficit. Right? Each of these is beginning with a light syllable. In fact, they have several light syllables. Heavy syllables are those that have more than one segment in the rhyme. So if there is a segment in the nucleus and another segment in the coda, that's 2 segments in the rhyme. If there are 2 segments in a branching nucleus and no coda, well, that's still got 2 segments in the rhyme. It's the number of segments in the rhyme that determines whether a syllable is light or heavy. A syllable that has 2 segments in a branching onset doesn't influence the syllable weight. It's the number of segments in the rhyme. So in words like appendix, pen, in appendix, p, e, n, the e and the n are together in a rhyme, 2 segments in the rhyme. It's a heavy syllable. Intestine, the tes, s forms a nucleus coda sequence, a heavy syllable. Testin. Celebration. Now bray has 2 parts to a branching nucleus. A. Remember, tense vowels get lengthened. Well, that lengthening is that lengthening fills 2 positions in a branching nucleus. So although there are 2 consonants in the onset br, that's not the reason why it's a heavy syllable. It's a heavy syllable because it has a branching nucleus. A. Celebration. So heavy syllables have more than one segment in the rhyme. Light syllables have one segment in the rhyme. So the si of citizen or cinema would be like you see here. S in the onset, I in the nucleus. There's no coda. The following consonant, either the N of nma in cinema or the T of tizen in citizen, those segments belong to the onset position of the following syllable. So a heavy syllable would be one that has 2 segments in the rhyme. Take, for example, the syllable lan. There's a single segment in the onset, 2 segments in the rhyme, 1 in the nucleus, 1 in the coda. That forms a heavy syllable. Or by. By has 2 segments in the branching nucleus, but since that nucleus is contained in the rhyme, it still counts as 2 segments in the rhyme, and therefore a heavy syllable. Okay. Now let's just look at one final example. I'll take a long word. You may have never seen it before, or maybe you have. Discombobulate. Right? So in terms of segments, right, I can identify the IPA symbols for each of the segments pronounced, and I can look through each segment and find the sonority peaks. So D is a stop, I has more sonority, then S has less. So there's a rise and a fall, so that forms a sonority peak. Well, each sonority peak is the nucleus of a syllable, and each nucleus is in the rhyme. The rhyme is part of the syllable with the onset. Inside the rhyme, a following consonant can form the coda position. So you get a syllable structure like this: discombobulate. Now, starting at the end of the word, and we may have some time for this next week, but the stress rules of English are based on the end of the word. And we start by asking, is the last syllable heavy? And in this case, the answer is yes. It has a branching nucleus, A, as well as a coda. So it forms a single heavy syllable. And so I'll put parentheses to mark that. For the purpose of stress, it's going to have stress all its own because it's a heavy syllable. And then I move on to the next syllable. We call this the penultimate syllable, the one before the last syllable. Now, by has a branching onset, but the onset doesn't contribute weight to the syllable. It has only a single segment in the rhyme, so it's a light syllable. And a light syllable can't bear stress by itself. But two light syllables together can. And if I move to the next syllable, the ba, again, is a light syllable. But those two light syllables can together form a stress group for the purpose of stress. And then I move on to the next syllable. Is it heavy? If yes, it forms what we call a monosyllabic stress. If not, if it's light, then it will join the next syllable. But in this case, you can see there is an and a two segments in the rhyme, so it forms a heavy syllable. And then the first syllable is also heavy. So there are going to be 4 stresses in a word like discombobulate. Discombobulate. Late gets a stress, but the y is unstressed. So the white circle is showing me unstressed, the dark is showing me stressed. But bob is primary stress, and then each of the others. You get the stress pattern discombobulate. Now, I haven't shown you all of the rules that produce this, but in phonology, we study the patterns that determine stress patterns. And notice that one unstressed syllable, the by, that's the context where we would expect to see vowel reduction. The vowel changes to schwa, and that's why in the pronunciation of discombobulate, the by is just a schwa, but all of the other vowels are clearly pronounced. Okay, I'm out of time. That brings us to the end. I'll stop there. Please be sure to check Manaba for any additional exercises, and then I'll see you next week. Thanks.